Greetings everyone, this is Peter Skov from Music is a Journey. Today I'm finally getting around to doing my video on 15 albums from the 1990s that I haven't listened to in about 20 years. A couple of months back I did a video of a box that I'd opened. It was labeled 1990s Miscellaneous, I think it was, and there were a lot of albums in there I simply had not listened to for a very long time. And I decided later on that I would like to listen to them again. So I wanted to put them from my iTunes library into my phone, and then I realized they weren't in my iTunes library. Now this actually had an important meaning because you see, around 2006 I got my first laptop computer where I could actually load CDs, rip CDs into the computer and put them onto playlists. After a little while I got an iPod, and then after that my first iPhone. So somewhere around 2008, 2009 I switched to listening to music mostly on CD or even on mixed MDs, which I still have down here, and started listening to my music basically on my iPhones ever since. Which has been convenient for me because I listen to music mostly during my commutes to and from work, which can easily be 90 minutes or more one way. So in any case, I realized I did not have a lot of those albums in my iTunes library, which means that I hadn't listened to them probably since before 2006. And I really wanted to hear them, so I loaded about probably close to 20 in there, but definitely 15 anyway stood out as albums that I wanted to hear again. And when I was listening to them, then I thought, well, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to reevaluate them. My opinions now, after 20 years have passed, and I have had 20 years of experience of listening to many new kinds of music I didn't listen to before. And as well, I've been watching some of these tier maker videos. People have been ranking albums by setting them into tiers, usually discographies of a particular group or sometimes of a particular period, such as the first wave black metal. I guess that's an era, but anyway. So I decided I would do it like that. And the way these tier maker videos usually work is you have the S tier, which is for super, it's the top. And then after that there's an A, B, C, D. If you want to go lower, you can. But I decided to change the titles a little bit. I saw somebody do one for Annihilator's discography, and he came up with some very clever titles for the S, A, B, C, D categories, ranks. So what I've decided to do for my S category, these are going to be surprisingly enjoyable. These are CDs, when I listened to them, I found I really enjoyed them much more than ever before. And they made such an impression on me that I wanted to listen to them again. And in fact, I will keep them on my phone for a while now. Even after I remove the playlist from my phone, I will keep those CDs on. So that's S tier, surprisingly good, or really good, surprisingly enjoyable. So A tier I have named actually very good. These were albums where I probably liked 2 or 3 songs back in the 1990s, and now listening to them, actually I found I liked quite a few more of the songs on those albums. A funny thing is, I remember my friends and I having this discussion back in the 1990s. We felt that a good album was one that had at least 2 songs on that you liked, which means that our opinions of albums from the 1990s were not very high. In the 80s, we had a good album or a great album where we liked a lot of the songs or some of the songs. But by the 90s, we were being very picky and saying, you know, 2 songs, that's good. I think perhaps my listening experience over the last 20 years has taught me to appreciate albums more. So I think that's one reason why going back to these has been really a worthwhile exercise. So A tier is actually very good. Now B tier I decided to call better than I remembered. So it means that yes, there were the 1 or 2, maybe 3 songs that I liked, and there were other ones that I liked as well too. However, the actually very good ones are probably artists that I will consider, or already have considered, buying more of their output. And in fact, in 1 or 2 cases, I already have. Now C tier could have a few more songs that thrill me. So these albums still have only 2, maybe 3 songs that I like, and the other ones are okay, but I don't really get that feeling of excitement one way or another. Now, I did actually consider having a D tier, but I had nothing to fit in there. And then I considered adding 2 albums on, which I also haven't listened to probably for about 20 years. But those 2 were actually already in the library. And even if I haven't listened to them for that long, I just felt they were different from the others because whether I listened to them or not, they actually had the distinction of already being included. So I'm going to stick with the original 15. And those are the rankings. So let's take a look at the tier maker screen here. All right, so here you can see how I've arranged everything. There's our S tier, our A, B, C tier, and I'll keep the D tier in there anyway just so you can see it. But I promise you, I have nothing to put into the D tier. And at the bottom here, you can see the album covers of the 15 albums that I will be taking a look at today. So I will try not to linger too much on each of these albums here, and let's get started. The first one to talk about is Beck's major label debut, Mellow Gold. I do remember getting this for probably Loser, and I think after getting it, there may have been 1 or 2 other tracks on this album that I liked. I do remember I really liked the soul-sucking Jerk, and actually a track number 11, which is entitled Mother F***er, according to the back of the CD. Listening to that one again, I do remember I really liked that one as well. Okay. So my impression the first time listening to this through again was that this was a person, I think this was coupled with the idea that I heard that Jeff Beck wrote Loser because he sucked at rapping. He could not write a good rap song, so he made one like Loser. And there are a couple of tracks on the album that have that kind of, what I thought of as white Junkyard Boy rap. And I think I got the Junkyard Boy impression just because a lot of the acoustic guitar playing or some of the percussion just sounds really sloppy and loose and like maybe played on instruments that you found at a junkyard. Of course, this is not to criticize the actual playing. I think it's intentional. As I listened to it a second time, I felt I started to understand what it was that Beck was trying to do with the music, and even if there's this kind of like sloppy cowboy style music or hippie rap style, whatever, I thought it was very creative. And I think what he has done is he has actually played the instruments. He's recorded himself playing a guitar riff or playing something, and then he has used that recorded sample as a loop to put through for choruses or verses. So he's done a lot of playing and sampling and assembling and putting things together, and I do understand that he actually had some other members in the band. I read something recently about why the bass lines sound so good. It's thanks to his bass player. So I want to put this album as an A rank because it is actually very good. In my opinion, I think I really appreciate the creativity, and it inspired me to go out and pick up another Beck album. So I got Odelay because I got it for a really super good price as a brand new factory sealed disc. And I think Odelay was a good choice because the approach is similar between the two. There is a little bit of evolution, but I feel there is a connection between these two. So it's not like Wero, which I already have from years ago, which is very, very different, I feel. It's much farther down the road. So Beck's Mellow Gold gets an A tier rank. The next album, well, here it is. One of the big classics of rock. This is Nirvana's Nevermind. In the late 1980s, I really started to lose my interest in a lot of metal groups. I felt that they were getting to be too polished in their sound production. The image seemed to be getting out of control. I loved a lot of the melodies, but I felt it was moving away from what had attracted me to heavy metal in the beginning. And as far as thrash metal goes, as far as thrash metal went, I felt it was also getting more refined, more technical. And the extreme bands that I liked, like Celtic Frost, Into the Pandemonium, wasn't really into it. Bathory, Under the Sign of the Black Mark, I know it's one of their most highest rated, best loved albums, but I felt it just didn't compare to the previous two albums. It wasn't good enough. So I kind of lost my interest in a lot of the extreme metal bands at the time. So when the 1990s came around, I was looking for new stuff that was hard-hitting and heavy. And of course, Nirvana had a very kind of raw approach. The drums sound actually really good on here. And the drums are actually not overly technical, but they're exciting. When I think about a lot of the 80s bands, I feel like the drumming was getting dumbed down until it was just a 4/4 beat that sounded like swatting a giant piece of tarpaulin stretched out in an echo chamber. And I do feel we're actually listening to a proper drum set playing on here. There's been a lot of said about this album, of course, about how significant it was, dropped late in 1991, some saying it even finished off the glam metal scene. And I remember seeing a video of Rick Beato where he was talking about what a great songwriter and melody writer Kurt Cobain was. So I listened to it again for the first time in 20 years, twice, and I have to say that I was not really as excited about hearing it this time. I don't know if it's because I listened to it an awful lot back in like late 91, 92? Maybe I just heard it too many times. Maybe it's like a Beatles album for me where I just know the songs all so well that they don't really thrill me anymore. Quite honestly, the songs I liked the best were Breed, because I really love that bass line, that although it does get to be a little bit repetitive, but still it's effective. And I also liked Territorial Pissings just because it's so off the rails, especially at the end where Kurt Cobain seems to be purposely trying to scream so hard that he's, blowing his vocal cords. It feels intentional, and I really like that energy. As for the rest of the album, there are some songs that I think were pretty good to hear again, and then there were some that, okay, I don't really need to hear them all that much anymore. And I started to feel also that a lot of the riffing had a lot of similarities, like it would go like low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high in some songs, or also that extra kind of flick, like, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, like this extra da, da, da part. And yeah, I don't know, I just wasn't so particularly thrilled to hear it, in spite of the fact that this is a monster album in the history of rock. So aside from 2, maybe 3 songs that I still really, actually felt something while listening to, this actually goes under could have a few more songs that thrill me. So that's into the C tier. Sorry, guys. All right, and following along those same lines, here is Foo Fighters with The Color and the Shape. Dave Grohl, of course, starting the band after the end of Nirvana. I bought this album for the song Everlong, and I remember Everlong and Monkey Wrench were my favorite tracks off of this album. Listening to it again, the first time through, I felt I really liked the guitar sound. Again, the drumming sounds very organic. It's natural drums, like sticks on skins without this big echo chamber effect. There's a lot of excitement in the drumming at times. It's, again, doesn't come across as like proggishly technical, but exciting, more like almost punkish in a way, right? Dave Grohl's voice, I loved his screaming voice, I love his coarse rock voice, I love his softer voice, and there were a couple of other songs, I think from Monkey Wrench down to, I don't know, was it Hey Johnny Park, My Poor Brain, and Wind Up? I think there was 3 or 4 together where I felt that 3 of the 4 songs, for example, actually were really good, and the other one just fits in there. I think there's a segue from one track to the next, and overall I really liked it. But going through the whole album, there were times where I thought, wow, what a cool riff, or what a cool sound, and there's a change up in the music, what are they going to do next? And then the song would end, and think, oh, I was just starting to get interesting. There is variety though. Listening to it the second time, I noticed more of the variation, some with clean guitar or even acoustic guitar. February Stars still stands out as a nice one for me. My Hero, I think I've just heard it a lot. I know it's about Kurt Cobain and it's a kind of emotional song, but I think I just heard it too much and it kind of doesn't really do anything for me anymore. So overall, I guess I'm going to say it also follows with Nirvana into the C rank. Could have a few more songs that thrill me. It's almost a B rank. But maybe I need to listen to it one more time to fully decide whether it should be a B or not. So for now, I'm going to put it into C rank because, again, when it's all said and done, Monkey Wrench and Everlong are the two still that really stand out. February Stars and maybe one or two more. But we are talking about, how many tracks in here? 13 tracks. So even if I like 3 or 4 of them, possibly 5, it means the rest are just kind of, in my opinion. Please remember that this is all my opinion and my impressions based on my experience and my preferences. And if I drop a big steaming loaf of meh on your favorite album, please don't be offended, but you are welcome to leave comments. Try to be reasonable. I think everybody who leaves comments on my channel, everyone so far has been, for the most part, quite gentlemanly. I think it's been mostly guys too, except for a few women maybe. Okay, so next up, let's take a look at Radiohead's Pablo Honey, the debut album of Radiohead. Of course, I bought this for Creep back in the day, and I do remember liking some other songs like Stop Whispering, and listening to it again, I realized also the second to last track, track 11, Lurgy, I think it is, I also quite liked. This is an album that features some good, strong, hard-hitting guitar, but wrapped up in melody. So even when the band starts to get heavy and the distortion is on and the guitars are wailing their notes, it still is within a melodic context. There's a lot of melody on here. It does strike me as a debut album. So listening to it the other night, I felt if I did not know what came next, I would be curious to know what came next. I would like to know what the band did for their sophomore, because if they took this approach and it just got polished up and refined a little bit, or a little bit more definitive in a way, they could probably do an even better album than this. And in fact, I do have the next 2 albums. I have the Bends, and OK Computer. OK Computer, I know it's probably their best loved album. I'm just kind of okay with it, but the Bends, there are 3 or 4 songs I really like on that album, and the rest of the album, probably I just need to listen to it a bit more, or maybe not. But it's not what, if I had heard this album, the Bends is not what I would have expected to come after this. But I do think it's interesting to note that there is that evolution happening even in the 1990s. And this is one thing that really impressed me with these albums I'm talking about here today. I think the 1990s actually were a really exciting time for music. In fact, maybe even more exciting than the 80s in a way, because in a lot of ways the 80s were kind of getting hooked on the technology. There were all these new keyboards, of course, that were coming out. There were these like MIDI things, like there were all these new electronic drums, and I felt like a lot of stuff in the 80s was getting hooked on the technology, what kind of sounds they can create with the instruments. And there is that whole 80s flavor that often sounds very dated now. But the 1990s, I feel there is a kind of explosion in diversity, a desire to experiment more and create fresh sounds. And in a way, it's almost like, I feel like the 1970s, where the lessons learned in the 60s were really explored and exploded outwards in the 70s. I started to get that impression from the 90s. And so it's interesting to see like a band like Radiohead taking such big steps between albums. Okay, so where am I going to put Radiohead? I think I will put it in better than I remembered, because in the end I only remember 2 songs, and it could be a C, like with Foo Fighters. It could be a B, but I'm putting it as a C. This one here, it could be a C, but I'm actually going to put it as a B. I might be a little bit generous maybe, but let's put Radiohead's Pablo Honey in B tier then, which means that I liked it just a little bit better than the Foo Fighters, which is actually strange. Maybe I like the Foo Fighters sound better, but I enjoy more of Radiohead's songs on the debut. Okay, next up, let's take a look at Blur's Parklife. Okay, this album just has always impressed me. And even though I haven't listened to it for ages all the way through, it was really a joy to listen to it because there is such variety on here. Of course, the opening track, Girls and Boys, is that kind of fun, almost disco-ish type song. Okay, I probably heard it enough in the day that I consider it more like a single that has been put on an album. But after that, Tracy Jacks and End of a Century, Park Life, Bank Holiday, Bad Head, there's just like each song has its own flavor, its own style, and you'll get like this song has some trumpet, this song has some saxophone, this song has some organ, and there are some instrumentals where it's almost like this kind of like home organ sound where like the rhythm is actually what's programmable into the organ. But there are just so many different sounds. There are some really cool guitar riffs, not aggressive, but just very melodic and very cool. Some of the songs, like I think it's Jubilee and Bank Holiday, are kind of on the punky edge bit, which is cool. But my impression overall is that this feels like, if you have ever heard the British band The Action from the 1960s, there was a compilation called Rolled Gold, and also The Attack. There was a compilation of their final recordings as well. So we're talking late 68 or late 67 or into 1968. I feel it's like that kind of an album. Like it was a time when they had a bunch of songs that were ready for an album. Maybe there were some B-sides, maybe there were some singles, but a final album never materialized. And this feels like that kind of compilation. It is long. There are 17 tracks, and the last one is a disco dance type whatever remix of Boys and Girls, which is not necessary. But overall, this album is just, it just shows so much willingness to create and experiment and do something, make each song into a piece of work on its own. So I really enjoyed this album a lot, listening to it again. Because it's a bit long, I probably won't be in such a rush to hear it all the way through again, but I found it's hard for me to pick a favorite track because I just enjoy almost every track on this. So this is going into S tier for surprisingly enjoyable, although not really surprisingly because I always remembered that I liked this. Okay, let's move along. Our next one is Massive Attack's Mezzanine. I bought this because I watched the movie Snatch, which means I probably didn't actually buy this in the 90s. I probably bought it in the early 2000s. And there's a scene where Brad Pitt's character is watching his mother's caravan going up in flames, and his mother is inside, and it's a really, horrible scene for him to witness. And the song that appears in that scene is the opening track here, Angel, from this album. And I just felt that suited the scene so perfectly, really kind of haunting and ominous. And of course, it's partly electronic, so we get a lot of this kind of electronic bass and rhythm, but with real electric guitars and real vocals. So that convinced me that I should try to pick up this album and see what it sounds like. So coming back to it now, because I never really listened to it much back in the day, but coming back to it now, Angel, still great song. But the text is very small on here, but okay, I can't see. But the second track also I found was very interesting because, again, I like this kind of this ominous, forbidding feeling in the music with the electronic programming of the bass and the rhythm, but it also does have, real guitars. We have dual male vocals, a higher tone and lower tone, and it just sets up a really cool atmosphere that I feel is kind of unique to the British scene, although in a way that track kind of reminds me of something from Germany for some reason, maybe because of the second lower tone male vocals. After that, there are probably 2 or 3 other ones. I do remember Dissolved Girl. So they actually have 3 vocalists on here, 2 men and 1 woman, and Dissolved Girl is the female vocals on that one. I remember I liked how it starts off light and then gradually builds and gets into a kind of harsher electric guitar riff part. But after that, it goes back to the mellow part and then just continues a little bit longer than I feel comfortable with. Also, I think it was the actual track Mezzanine, and I think overall there are about 5 tracks on here that I considered I would listen to again several times, whereas the rest of the album I thought didn't really go far enough for me anyway, didn't like reach into me far enough for me to say I'm enjoying listening to it. So I think it's going to be a C tier. Could have a few more tracks that thrill me, although no, I'm going to put it in B. Because B is better than I remembered, and I really only remembered the 1 song. So Mezzanine by Massive Attack is going into B tier for better than I remembered. but I probably am not going to rush out to get another Massive Attack album. Although I might still want to check one out just in case. Who knows which way they evolved to or where they evolved from. Alright, next up we have Veruca Salt's 8 Arms to Hold Me, and I bought this one for Volcano Girls, which is still an awesome song. This is a band with 2 girls on guitars and vocals, and 2 guys in the rhythm section, and this is a straight up kick-ass rockin', hard rockin' album. And I really love the female vocals because I love the energy that they put into sometimes, especially like in Volcano Girls where she sings like 1, 2, 3, wow! And the way she just pushes her voice, and it's that female scream that's just going over the limit kind of thing. You really feel the energy and the music in that. There are a few other songs on here. Let's see, what have we got? 14 tracks in total. I'd say there are about 5 or 6 songs that I still really got a thrill listening to. One of my favorites has always been, what's it called? Shutterbug, track number 8, Shutterbug. Volcano Girls, Straight is good, Don't Make Me Prove It, awesome. Yeah, I think the first 4 or 5 tracks are really good, and Shutterbug. And after that, it's like, this part is good, and okay. So I'd say there's probably about 5 tracks on here that actually really give me a thrill, like, wow, what a great album. But the rest of the album doesn't get me as much, and so I'm kind of wavering, like, do I want to check out their next album and see if it's any good, or am I okay with just this one? In fact, honestly, I didn't listen to this for so long just because I didn't feel like it. Again, I only remembered Volcano Girls and Shutterbug being songs that I liked, but it's true, there are a few on here. So I think I'm going to put it under B tier for better than I remembered, because I will say that there are 5 or 6 songs on here actually that I do like, which is better than 1 or 2, of course. So I'm going to put it in better than I remembered. I am kind of curious about their next album, but whether I actually check it out or not depends which way the wind blows. Alright, we're going to take a kind of a big detour here and check out the debut album of the Crash Test Dummies, The Ghosts That Haunt Me. This album was surprisingly enjoyable. There you go, it's going into S tier. I really only remembered it for the opening track, Winter Song, which actually is a song that regularly has been popping into my head over the last couple of decades, just randomly popping into my head because I always liked it so much. And of course, Superman Song, which is, I think, was the song that was on the radio. Androgynous also appeared on the radio a bit too. You got to understand about the Crash Test Dummies. Vocalist, is it Brad Roberts? He sings with a very low voice, and sometimes it sounds like he's so low he can't quite get the notes quite properly. But it has a certain effect, which I think actually works. It's kind of like Leonard Cohen. If you listen to him, you might think, well, he's half talking, half singing, and his voice is really low, but it works for him. And I think Brad Roberts' voice works for him, at least on this album. And on the next one, I bought it, and I like it. But he also has Ellen Reed, one of the band members, is also doing backup vocals, and I think the effect of the two of them together is really good. Now, this is almost entirely an acoustic album. Of course, we've got, I think, an electric bass, and there's the occasional clean electric guitar, but the rest of it is drums, acoustic guitar, mandolin, piano. Oh, there might be some organ, but I don't think there's much in the way of synthesizers. There's a harmonica, accordion, there's a couple of songs with a violin or fiddle. I think there's even one with a bit of wooden flute or something in there. These are, yeah, mostly acoustic songs. It's not exactly country music, although some of the songs do have a bit of a country flavor, especially when the fiddle comes in. It's not exactly folk because it's still, I don't know, it's like a kind of folk country rock blend. But one of the things that really make the Crash Test Dummies unique, at least on this album, and the next one because I got it, are the lyrics. Brad Roberts writes unique lyrics. They sound almost childlike. At least on this album here. There's one about like traveling around the world together, like we don't need to be married to travel together. We'll go to the British Isles and we'll send trinkets back to our friends back home, and we can travel to Yugoslavia. How old is this album? Superman Song says like, Tarzan was never a ladies' man. He'd just come along and scoop 'em up quick as a cat, whatever. And then like Clark Kent, now there was a real gent. He would never be caught in hanging around in no jungle scene, dumb as an ape doing nothing. Whatever. A lot of the lyrics just have this really like almost childlike naivety or innocence to them, and it makes them really fun. Like one song here about moving to the country, it's like for breakfast we'll fry up our own hand-picked eggs, or we'll have chickens, pigs, ducks, and whatever it is you have on the farm. I don't know. I just feel that the lyrics are quite quirky in that way, and mostly pretty light, except of course the final track, My Funeral. It has a little bit more of a somber atmosphere to it, of course, and there's like, if you show up to my funeral, will you forget the grudges that you hold against me? I don't know, I just found it to be a really outstanding and unique album for the 1990s, where my impression of the 90s is mostly the rise of rap and hip-hop, or grunge, or going into things such as nu metal and industrial and all that. And here comes an album that is almost entirely acoustic, with these really like unusual lyrics and unusual vocal style. So surprisingly good. S tier, and listened to it twice, loved it both times, bought the next album because I loved this one so much, and I'm keeping it on my phone to listen to both of the albums yet again, and probably again. Okay. Now here's another one. Now this is one probably most of you will not know. This is a group called Figgy Duff from Newfoundland. They formed in the 70s. They released 2 albums in the 80s, I think it was, or 80, 82, maybe 89, and this one was their final album, which was originally released in 93. I remember buying it on a trip to Nova Scotia in 1995 with the girl I was with, and later on we parted, and I think she kept it. So I liked it so much that I went and bought it again. This one has a release date, I think it's of 1997 on the back here, so this must be a reissue. So Figgy Duff were a folk rock band, and I can't say I have a lot of folk rock in my collection, but listening to it, I remember there were 2 or 3 songs that I really liked, and they still stood out in my memory. But I really enjoyed the whole album, except for maybe the final track. The title track, Downstream, I felt was just a little slow and meandering for a stream. And there was nothing really I felt got to me. But all the other tracks, the other, 9 tracks on this album, I like all of them. They're really great. Some of them go with that kind of, hand percussion, that Celtic drum thing that I don't know what it's called, but, you tap it away in your hand like this. Some of them actually have a proper drum kit. There is some clean electric guitar, even a bit of distortion in places, but it's not coming in as a heavy metal or hard rock heavy, but it's more like a moody atmosphere to add in this distorted guitar. We get, of course, mandolin and accordion and wooden flute, I think, similar to the Crash Test Dummies one, but this is more of a Celtic influenced folk rock type album, and I think it's really, really good. So I'm putting this into S tier, and boy, I just feel really glad that I bought this, because this was not a mainstream type album, not even it was a downstream album. Yeah, so Figgy Duff's Downstream gets an S tier from me, and probably most of you don't know this, do you? So yeah, cool. All right, let's move along. We have Colin James and the Little Big Band. So Colin James, his debut album was a blues guitar album, and it was so good, word is that Stevie Ray Vaughan went up to Saskatchewan to find Colin James and meet him in person. And his next album, I remember, still had the bluesy guitar, but it was more of a mainstream type album. I can't remember the title, but there was a song called I Just Came Back to Say Goodbye, which was pretty big and pretty fun. And I had the album, but wasn't really my thing. But then this one came out, and I heard Colin James on the radio, on a radio show in Vancouver, and they played the song Breaking Up the House, which is like an old school rock and roll, really fun, cool song with rock and roll piano and some great, you know, they've got brass, they've got saxophones, they've got the bluesy guitar, old school bluesy guitar, and Colin James is a great singer for that old style music. So I remember that one and a song called Satellite that I liked, but I went through this album twice again recently. What is it we've got on here? 12, 13 tracks? I'd say 12 of them I really liked, and the other one was okay. I could dig it. We've got, let's see here, what have we got? 3 Hours Past Midnight, really cool bluesy track with blues guitar. Cadillac Baby, exactly a big band one. You've got all the brass going, the trumpets and saxophones and the drums and the upright bass and the guitar and whatever. Satellite, really cool, kind of slow, I don't know, jazzy type thing, like boom, 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 boom. And the saxophones come in, and then there's a really cool saxophone solo and a bluesy guitar solo, jazzy bluesy guitar solo. Breaking Up the House, yeah, No More Doggin', pretty cool, like old school rock and roll type thing. The Boogie Twist Part 2, really fun instrumental with like, I think it's an organ solo or a piano solo, gosh, saxophone solo, guitar solo. So if you like this kind of big band, jazzy, old school rock and roll, jump blues type of a thing, this is really, really well done. And in fact, I probably should have checked to find out if these are all originals or arrangements, but it just sounds really great. Do I want the second album in the Little Big Band series? I'm not sure, but I really enjoyed this one. I'm going to put this one in A tier for actually very good. I'm not going to quite give it surprisingly enjoyable, although it's pushing it, but actually very, very good. Okay. A few more to go through here, so let's try to pick up the pace. Tori Amos, Under the Pink. Cornflake Girl, of course, and I do remember there were a few other tracks I liked, but I couldn't remember which ones. Listening to it now, the opening track, Pretty Good Year. Beautiful piano, interesting lyrics, weird in one part, but suitable. We've got God, which is cool. It's got this like squeaky, snappy, squeaky guitar sounds for these weird effects. Cool piano, nice lyrics. Let's see here. Past the Mission was one of my favorites. Again, beautiful piano in it. Lots and lots of gorgeous piano work on here. And again, 1990s people, what happened? Suddenly playing piano beautifully is fashionable again. And in a way, it actually reminds me of the original Renaissance, the idea that started with Jim McCarty and Keith Relf of the Yardbirds, where they said they wanted to start up a band that focused on classical piano rather than hard rock guitar. And this reminds me of that. Of course, Tori Amos being the vocalist and piano player, every song has piano. But there's a good variety of music in here as well. Space Dog is fun. Cornflake Girl, The Waitress I really liked. You know, I want to kill this waitress. There are just a few songs. I think Bells for Her, Icicle or Cloud on My Tongue, Baker Baker. It's a little bit too much of just piano, and I don't feel there's a specific melody or hook I can get into. It's just beautiful classical piano with someone singing lyrics over top, and I don't have a landing point on those songs. So I'm going to give this one here actually better than I remembered. A B tier one, better than I remembered. If those other four or five songs in here that are just kind of okay or not really to my interest, if they were a little bit better, I would bump it up to an A. But let's give it a B tier for better than I remembered. And half of the album, I'm going to say I really do enjoy it. So one that just I totally, almost passed by completely is Holly McNarland. Does anybody remember Holly McNarland? I think she's still out there. I think this was her debut album called Stuff. Dog's butthole on the back there. And I got some scribbles from her because I saw her at A&B Sound in Vancouver. She was doing signings for the release of her album. So if you think Sarah McLachlan with an attitude, Sarah McLachlan with a sneer and more emphasis on electric music rather than a delicate acoustic music, yeah, more sneering and less softness. Sarah McLachlan's evil twin, maybe. I think Elmo was the big one off here, and maybe Coward. I remember some of the songs I liked, and most of the album kind of went past me. And listening to it again, Coward is good. The Box is interesting. Water is a great song. It's a tragic song. She has lost a friend in the water, you know, whatever, aquatic death, aquatic accident. And she sings about how she wants to, I'll crouch beneath the boats. I'll learn to breathe. When I die, I want to die in water. And it's just a really powerful, grievous song. And there are parts where the guitars are just wailing as the music builds. You feel like that wailing electric guitar is that anguish of the soul of having lost someone so dear to you and just wanting to get into the water and join yourself with that person once again. I don't know. So yeah, I love that song, Water. But overall, maybe just 3 or 4 songs on here, and the rest of them, I probably just need to either listen to it more, or maybe because it's her debut, maybe actually the next album or the one after that actually were much better. I really don't know. Maybe I should check it out. But anyway, Holly McNarland's stuff. I think she's from Winnipeg. And I'm going to put it into could have a few more songs that thrill me. That's a C tier, which I actually kind of feel bad doing. You know, I mean, did it for like Nirvana too, but I kind of feel bad for doing it for Holly McNarland because I met her and I thought she was pretty cool. Who knows? Debut, so maybe her other albums are even better. Then, Katie Lang's Ingenue. Ingenue, is that how you pronounce it? So she started out as more of a country singer, and this album here is not a country album. Honestly, this album is not what I would normally listen to. The big song, the final track, track 10, Constant Craving, was the big hit. It's great. It's a great song. Still thrills me to hear it. And my absolute favorite on here is Season of Hollow Soul, track number 7. That one really actually gets me feeling something. Even more than Constant Craving. However, the rest of the album, none of the songs really get in under my skin to make me feel something, but I am going to tell you this. It is a beautifully produced album, and there are just so many sounds on here. All of them, pretty much almost all acoustic instruments. Oh, I don't know, was there some electric guitar a bit? But we've got acoustic guitars, again, mandolins and accordions and violins, lots of cool percussion and drumming, and of course Katie Lang's fantastic voice. Gosh, she can sing beautifully. She, do I call her a she or do I call her a they? I'm tempted to call her a she just because I think that's what we actually did back in the 90s. My apologies if Katie Lang actually prefers a different pronoun, but fabulous vocals on this person. And one of the things I really thought was cool was that there are many different sounds I feel from other like world music which are brought in and put in here, not in a world music style. So we've got one song, oh gosh, do I remember what it was now? No, I don't. But one song, the violin played in a way that reminded me of a Chinese erhu, that upright 2-stringed instrument that they play, you know, like a violin. And another song had some guitar in it, or maybe mandolin, that gave me a Zorba the Greek kind of feel to it, but not like Zorba the Greek, you know? So I just feel that the arrangements, the composition, the production, the recording quality, engineering, just everything on here is so fantastic. The only thing is that it is a very mellow album. And while I love mellow songs, sometimes they are my favorites on an album, this is just mellow song after mellow song after mellow song. And I feel like this is an album where you sit with your hands on your lap and your eyes closed and kind of sway gently to the music. That's how you appreciate this. And I do want to get up and move in between the mellow songs. So I'm going to put this under A tier, actually very good. It's just a little bit too mellow for me to put it into surprisingly enjoyable. But for all the sounds and production, it is surprisingly enjoyable. Katie Lang's Ingenue, I think. 2 more to go. Gosh, I thought I wouldn't make this a long video, but hey, Matchbox 20. Yourself or Someone Like You, the debut album. And what's funny is I actually listened to this twice. And then the other night I listened to this for the second time, and when it ended, this song, the first song on here came on, and this is the first song on here. What is it called here? Real World. Is just a feel-good, upbeat, fun song. So I think I loved it even more after feeling what a relaxing album this is. I do like this album for a few songs. Real World I really like. 3 a.m. very nice. My absolute favorite on here is Back to Good. That is a song that really makes me feel something, and the emotion in the vocals when it really starts building in that one part, and he's almost half shouting and half singing, and I just feel like, based on the lyrics, what emotions are coming out. Really well done. And the whole section with the brass trumpets and that part where it's like dun 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 dun. I love that part every time. So that song actually must be one of my favorite songs of the 90s, because I love hearing it so much, and I've listened to it 3 or 4 times now in the last couple of weeks. So Back to Good, excellent. Real World, good fun song. 3 a.m. nice. There were a couple of other ones on here too that were pretty good. I don't remember. There was one where they talk about there's a squeak hinge on the gate to let us know when he comes around. I forget what song that is. Good atmosphere in that. But I start to feel like after a while, again, a lot of the songs have a kind of a similar approach. There's a sadness to the lyrics. It's like, if you could just imagine being the person who admits the relationship is not working out because of me. It's not working out because it's me. I'm the one that's at fault. And that sentiment kind of seems to be in most of the songs. So all about kind of sad people feeling that they're just not good enough, or that something in their life is just not happy enough. And it does get to be a little bit uninteresting after a while. Unless, of course, maybe you really like that kind of thing. So, So the final album to talk about is Tonic's Lemon Parade. This is probably the closest to what I was listening to in the 1980s. This, to me, actually reminded me, if you put Paul Rodgers on here as the vocalist, it would sound like a 1990s version of Free or Bad Company, I think. We have some clean guitar, electric guitar or acoustic guitar, and more mellow, pretty type tracks. We also have some more solid rockin' tracks, and some that kind of, mid-range in between, where there's some good melodies and also some heavy guitar, but it's still rather melodic. Overall, this album did sound better than I remembered, because I remembered liking it for Soldier's Daughter. There is also a song on here, Mountain, that I found I really liked. Thick was really good. A couple of other ones too also stood out for me, although I didn't check all the song titles. So I'm going to put it in as a B tier, better than I remembered. And I looked up to see what Tonic did after this. Their debut apparently just went, was it 5 times platinum? Or am I confusing it with a different band's album now? But anyway, it did really, really well. And they just went from their debut into being really big group, but they did only about 2 more albums, then they went off and did other things, then they did a 4th album, then they redid this one in acoustic or something like that. So they don't have a really big output, and I don't remember if they're still active now or not. But yeah, the debut album, quite good, better than I remembered. Some of the songs were really good to hear again. Some of the songs were I'd forgotten about, were really good to hear again. Okay, so this video turned out to be much, much longer than I remembered. Maybe that was a nice little stroll down memory lane for you from the 1990s. Listening to these, I actually got a much better impression of the 90s than I had. I always thought the 90s were good, but I felt for me it was like 70s were the best, and then somewhere between 80s and 90s. But now I think I really like the 90s a lot more than I remembered. The 90s for me were a very experimental time, trying out lots of different things. Most bands whose albums I bought 1 album or 2 and then stopped. Very few bands actually, there were few bands I actually really got into and continued buying their releases. Mostly it's 1 or 2 albums. But looking back at my 90s collection, the ones that I bought back then that I didn't talk about today, plus the ones that I have bought since, I think the 90s were actually a really wonderful, exciting time. And hey, it was the rebirth of prog, and progressive metal came along, and many things were just happening overall in the rock, prog, alternative rock, industrial, all this quasi folk and other type things. There was just really a lot happening in the 90s. So I think the 90s, I'm going to make some more visits into the 90s over the next few weeks, I think now. Okay, that's it. Long video. Thank you for watching. Leave your comments below if you have anything you want to say. And maybe I'll do another tier ranking in some other future date. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.